Hello, thank you for joining us today. My name is Aidan Sullivan. I'm the Vice President of Photo Assignments at Getty Images. Behind every image there's a story. Whether that story is told by a Getty Images photographer, filmmaker, or editor, one constant remains: the passion we share for all types of imagery. For the next podcast in our ongoing series, co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of Getty Images, Jonathan Klein, talks with award-winning photojournalist Mario Tama. Mario joined Getty Images in 2001 and has since covered many major events around the world, including September the 11th, the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, and the funeral of Pope John Paul II. Mario's moving work in New Orleans covering Hurricane Katrina before, during, and the aftermath have earned him recognition from many prestigious competitions, including Pictures of the Year International, the NPPA's Best of Photojournalism competition, and the White House News Photographers Association. You may have recently seen these award-winning images in National Geographic, Newsweek, and Time.com. Today, Mario describes what his life is like as a Getty Images photojournalist based in New York City, who spends his days helping people tell their stories and giving them a voice through his images.
So Mario, how did you get into photojournalism?
I was always surrounded by photography, especially pictures that my grandfather had taken back in World War II, prior to World War II in Europe, before they emigrated to the States. Learning about photojournalism kind of forced me to come out of my shell a bit as a person and to interact with these people. So it was a way for me to experience worlds that I didn't know anything about.
Now, many photojournalists refer to the camera as their almost emotional protection. Has it helped you emotionally?
Once you put the camera up to your eye, you realize that you're doing a job, and you're doing a job to bring these people's stories to other people around the globe. At that moment, you're able to disconnect emotionally.
Have you ever got to a position where you were on the edge of not being able to work due to the emotion?
Yeah, I can remember one time in an orphanage for disabled children in Baghdad, where the screams and the cries and the echoes and the smells and just the total, complete, overwhelming sensation from all of the senses kind of just caused me to stop and have to walk out.
Now, your career pretty much started with 9/11.
I remember walking out of my apartment and walking around to the corner and seeing that hole in the South Tower. I was really struck by the hearts and souls of New Yorkers. There's one picture in particular that I think of, and it's a picture of a line of a bucket brigade of firefighters standing amidst the rubble. It's 3 days later, and they've got this bucket brigade, and they're just searching and trying to look for any kind of person to rescue.
You've become extremely well known for your extraordinary work in New Orleans. How did it happen that this guy has become very, very attached to that city?
I just felt it was my duty to remind people that these New Orleanians are still there, and they're still trying to bring that city back to where it is. I have to keep going back until it becomes that city that I fell in love with in the beginning.
And did you imagine that this was actually happening in the U.S.?
I think that was one of the biggest shocks, to see the absolute societal breakdown of an entire American city in front of your own eyes was, for me, completely incomprehensible.
Do you still have some hope, or do you feel that the public consciousness has moved on?
But I am hopeful, because compared to 2 years ago, it's a much better place. Most of the touristic areas and a lot of the cultural areas have been rebuilt.
This image over here, it's always resonated with people who've seen it.
As my foot was going down, the brightness of it obviously caught my eye, and I jumped out of the way and stepped next to it. And what was unbelievable to me was that it was lying there untouched in this beautiful aura of light.
When we look at some of the pictures of the people, do you have a particular relationship with any of the subjects?
I try to reconnect with the people that I've established friendships with. There's one particular community. I know a lot of people there. Almost all of the housing projects have been torn down in New Orleans following the storm, and it's a wonderful glimpse into the past of New Orleans.
Well, you've got a very iconic shot of the Superdome.
To me, it looked like one small sliver of light from heaven peering its way into the gates of hell. And there's these few people there gathered on the bottom, and they're They're just motionless. I don't know what the heat was in there, but it must have been maybe 120 degrees, and God knows what these people are feeling, and the people that were stuck in there for so many days.
Well, I think there's no way that it will be forgotten, and I also give a tremendous amount of credit to some of the magazines, in particular National Geographic.
They've really done a fantastic job about keeping this in the public eye.
You've spent a fair amount of time on the election.
This election by far has been the most fascinating. I mean, Barack Obama is someone that does a good job of portraying that he has a certain depth to his soul, and it certainly looks that way through photographs.
You also said earlier on that you really enjoyed covering McCain, and this is a terrific, intimate moment between McCain and a soldier.
That soldier kind of grabbed McCain and just looked into his eyes and really said something that stirred something in McCain that made him stop in his boots. It's such a loud venue that there was no way for us to hear what he was saying. That's the beautiful thing about photography. There are certain moments that simply transcend what human nature is all about, and that illuminate what's going on in our hearts. And I think, hopefully, in pictures like that, we're able to do that.
You talk about body language a lot. Let's begin with some images of Obama and Senator Clinton on the day she conceded and endorsed him.
One in particular is this vertical picture where Barack has his hand on Hillary's shoulder, and he's got, I think, one or two fingers on his shoulder, gently nudging her off stage after she gave her speech. There's another image where Barack's clasping her hand and taking her in a warm embrace, and he's looking directly at her, but she's sort of looking off into the distance.
Even though the images look like they're engaged, there is this distance.
There is, and that picture, in the body language, in the shape of his hand, he's kind of gesturing with his hand that he's perhaps, not really all that interested in what she's saying, and she's not even looking directly at him. She's kind of looking out the window.
When we go on to John McCain at the podium,
and we were all waiting for that moment of the two coming out together at the podium, that kind of victory, stereotypical picture, and we never saw that, and we were wondering what was happening. And only after going through the edit and looking at their body language that I came to the conclusion that these people had probably never met before, or maybe once or twice before, because there just was no chemistry between them.
No connection. Is it important when you're shooting to remain unbiased?
I absolutely believe in the creed of maintaining a neutral bias when you're covering things like politics. I would challenge anyone to look at my pictures of the two candidates and tell me who I was voting for.
Well, thanks a lot. We could carry on talking about so many of these images, and really appreciate everything you do for us.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. It's my pleasure.